You're about to find out why the most famous pirate in history probably never buried a single chest of gold, and why that lie has still pulled thousands of people into holes in the ground chasing him. Everyone thinks they know this story. A giant pirate with burning fuses in his beard, a stained map with a big red X, a hidden cove where Blackbeard supposedly buried a fortune so huge the sand would practically jingle under your feet. 300 years later, nobody's dug up that hoard. But the legend's doing just fine. Here's the part that should make you uneasy. The closer you get to the real Edward Teach, the more his treasure looks like a weapon he loaded into people's minds, not into a chest. In this video, you'll see how Edward Teach turned himself into Blackbeard, what he actually stole, the most famous spots people swear he buried treasure, and why the serious evidence keeps coming up thin. Then we'll flip the map. Because if historians are right, his real jackpot was never gold. It was leverage, fear, and a story so good you still half believe it. So, let's open the file on Blackbeard's lost treasure. The man behind the monster probably started as Edward Teach or Thatch. He was likely a regular sailor and then a privateer during the War of the Spanish Succession. When the war ended, governments dumped thousands of trained, armed seamen back onto the docks. They knew the trade routes. They knew how to fight. They knew how much money moved on those sea lanes. A lot of them decided they didn't need a flag anymore. Teach joined that current. He linked up with the pirate Benjamin Hornigold in the Caribbean. At first, he was just another man on another stolen ship, but he understood something most of his rivals didn't. You don't win as a pirate by firing more shots. You win by making sure no one dares to make you fire them. He grew his beard long and dark. He tied slow, burning fuses into it and lit them before combat. Witnesses describe him standing on deck with smoke curling around his face, sparks drifting in front of his eyes, like some demon pulled out of the sea. He picked a new name to go with the performance. Not Edward, Blackbeard. Then he found the perfect stage. In 1717, he captured a French ship and refitted her as his flagship. He called her Queen Anne's Revenge. He crammed her with more cannon than a merchantman that size was meant to carry. When that ship appeared on your horizon with a black flag and a smoking monster at the rail, you understood the situation without a speech. Be honest, if you were a merchant captain with a family, would you really stand and fight that? Or would you hand over the cargo and pray he let you keep your hands? Over less than 2 years at his peak, Blackbeard and his crews captured dozens of ships in the Caribbean and along the American coast. He took sugar, rum, cocoa, cloth, weapons, medicines, coins, and jewelry. He blockaded Charleston and held the town hostage for medical supplies. He could be brutal, but he knew dead sailors don't pay ransoms and don't spread stories. His main weapon wasn't the cutlass. It was the expectation of what he might do with it. So, where's the giant hoard? If you add up his documented captures, some estimates put the total value of what passed through his hands at millions in today's money. That's where the myth kicks in. The fantasy version says he converted all that into gold and silver, packed it into chests, rode to some secret spot, buried it, and died with the map in his head. Here's the part nobody who sells treasure tours will say out loud. For a working pirate captain, that would have been one of the dumbest financial plans imaginable. We know what real pirates usually did. They spent money fast. Rum, sex, gambling, bribes, weapons, repairs, informants. Most died with more enemies than savings. The only pirate we're really sure buried treasure in the classic way is William Kidd, and that seems to have been a small stash he hoped to use as a bargaining chip, not his entire life's haul. If burying everything in one spot was such a brilliant move, why did almost no one else do it? Now look at the place where everyone assumes his main hoard should show up. His flagship. In 1996, divers found a wreck off Beaufort Inlet, North Carolina that matches Queen Anne's Revenge. Archaeologists have been hauling artifacts off that site for years. Cannons, anchors, tools, weapons, glassware, medical gear, even a coin weight with Queen Anne's image. This is his world in rust and mud. What they haven't pulled up is a gigantic, movie-ready pile of gold. There are coins, there's valuable cargo, but nothing like one perfect chest of Spanish treasure sitting untouched in the sand. Now ask yourself this: if you really believed in one master hoard, would you bet it on a ship you were running aground on a sandbar? By 1718, Blackbeard could feel the net closing. Governors and merchants were getting tired of his game. He accepted a royal pardon from North Carolina's governor, Charles Eden, then slid back toward piracy under a thin coat of legality and local corruption. He spent time around Bath, North Carolina. He hosted parties. He used Ocracoke Inlet as a hangout. This is when rumor says he started dropping hints about a real treasure. Some accounts claim he said his true wealth lay in a place only he and the devil knew. That one line has done more work than any map. It promises a hoard. It brands him with the devil. It tells you you'll never get it. Here's the part you have to face. That line works perfectly as a curse and a marketing slogan. It works terribly as actual instructions. But people hate an unsolved promise, so they built their own maps. Cayman Brac has a treasure pit tied to Blackbeard in local lore. Ocracoke, where he anchored and died, has endless whispers about loot in the dunes, in lost inlets, or sunk in nearby channels. Around Bath, the story of a brick vault at Plum Point took hold. In the 1920s, a newspaper ran an article about 3 strangers who supposedly dug up a chest there at night and vanished by boat. When archaeologists actually examined that area, they found the remains of 19th century buildings and general disturbance, but no clear evidence of a pirate vault. The vault story had no verified witnesses, just a vivid article mixing dreams, gossip, and the perfect size of a mysterious brick box. Now ask yourself this: if someone really hauled a legendary chest out of the ground in a small town, would the only record be a single dramatic news piece years later? You see the same pattern in story after story. The closer you look, the more the "we already found it" claims fall apart. Even the image of what he stole is warped. Blackbeard mostly hit merchantmen, not royal treasure galleons. His loot was messy and practical. Barrels of sugar and rum, bales of cloth, guns and powder, medicines, everyday coin and some jewelry. If he hid anything on land, it was probably specific stashes of useful goods and money near safe anchorages, not a single gleaming dragon hoard. So, why is the chest myth unkillable? First, it's a perfect story engine. One chest, one X. One map that might still be out there. That fantasy keeps charter boats booked, metal detectors sold, and TV shows renewing season after season. Here's the part that should make you feel a little used. A legend that never pays off is still valuable, as long as people keep paying to chase it. Second, buried treasure cleans piracy up. The real economy of Blackbeard's world was ugly. Stolen cargo fed into bigger trade networks. Insurers raised rates. Merchants passed losses to customers. Slaves were taken, moved, and sold. Violence was the engine, not the set dressing. A chest under a palm tree lets you skip all that. You can focus on the quest and ignore the system. Be honest, which is easier to talk about over dinner? A cool pirate map, or a floating robbery ring built on colonialism and human misery? Third, 19th century fiction rewired how we think about pirates. Long after the Golden Age ended, writers like Robert Louis Stevenson turned buried treasure into the default plot device. Treasure Island gave us the map, the mutiny, the island of bones. Once that template existed, every famous pirate got retrofitted into it. Blackbeard was too iconic to leave out, so his legend got grafted onto a story he probably never lived. That's why you now have a split screen. On one side, historians saying pirates almost never buried treasures. On the other side, a culture that cannot imagine Blackbeard without a secret hoard. Here's the part nobody likes to hear. The Blackbeard in your head is built at least as much by Victorian fiction as by anyone who actually saw his face. So, how did it really end? In November 1718, the governor of Virginia sent Lieutenant Robert Maynard to kill him. Maynard lured Blackbeard into shallows near Ocracoke and sprung an ambush. The fight went close and bloody. Witnesses say Blackbeard took multiple gunshots and more than 20 sword cuts before he finally dropped. Maynard had his head cut off and hung from his ship as proof. If there'd been a known X, a secret vault all his officers understood, this is when you'd expect it to surface. A crewman could bargain for his life with directions. A governor could demand the coordinates. There'd be some record of a spectacular seizure. Instead, all we see is scattered loot, not a myth-sized score. Now ask yourself this. If his inner circle believed there was one true buried treasure, do you really think every single one of them chose death, prison, or poverty over digging it up and bragging about it? We've had 3 centuries to find proof. We've found his likely flagship. We've found cannons, tools, coins, and everyday objects. We've found letters, trial records, and local newspapers. What we have not found is one solid, documented Blackbeard hoard pulled from the ground and verified by more than a good story. Here's the part that actually matters. The way we keep telling this story says more about us than about him. We want there to be one secret pile of wealth that can fix everything if we just find it. We want to believe there's a map out there with our name on it. We want to turn a man who terrified real sailors into a puzzle we can solve from our couch. That's safer than looking at the real wreckage he left behind. Historians looking at the same trail see a different kind of treasure. They see how he turned fear into currency, how his image made merchants surrender without a fight, how his reputation let him push governors into pardons and backroom deals, how one rumored line about a treasure only he and the devil knew could keep people chasing him centuries after his skull rotted away. If you look at it that way, his real treasure starts to look like control. Control over what traders expected when they saw his flag. Control over what officials thought they could get away with by working with him. Control over the story that would outlive his body. At the start, I told you we'd come back to one idea. Here it is. Blackbeard's lost treasure might not be buried under sand. It might be buried in what you still want this story to be. A neat chest, a clean X, a secret that belongs to you if you're clever enough to crack it. So, the real mystery isn't, where did he hide the gold? It's, why do we need that gold to be real so badly, and what does that need let us ignore about the world he actually lived in? If you want more dark history and myth versus reality stories that don't flinch from the uncomfortable parts, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next deep dive. And tell me in the comments which version of Blackbeard's treasure you think is more dangerous. The chest everyone is still chasing, or the legend that keeps distracting us from the real cost of the Age of Piracy.